Welcome, everybody. As I said, my name is Al Briggs. I am an educator. I've been an educator for 23 years. I've been a graphic designer using Adobe tools for 25 years. So my journey with Adobe has gone from being a user in an industry context to teaching it in a university context to supporting staff in an education context to talking to the wonderful people in South Australia at 4:03 p.m. my time on Monday, the 2nd of June. So it's very, very lovely to be here. Um, I am used to running a relatively noisy classroom. And what I mean by that is just if you have questions, please feel free to reach out. Chuck them in the chat. I do tend to go in and monitor the chat really carefully with this stuff because I know that the most important thing for me is to make sure that everybody comes away with a clear idea about what they could potentially do with this and what the potential next steps could be. So I'm happy to go at whatever pace suits the majority. I will be sharing some links with you. I'll also be making my presentation deck available to Chelsea so that you can then go in and share it and have a play with it and take a look at all of those things. I'll even, because I'm a very nice human being, share it as an Express presentation so that you can dive straight into Adobe Express and have a play with it. So look, my idea today and the aim for today's session is to give you a little bit of an overview of Adobe Express, what we're doing in Adobe Express across Australia and New Zealand in not just the K-12, but also in the higher education space, to get you guys to have a little bit of play time with Express so you can sort of see what that functionality is. So I am Al Briggs. I am our Adobe Customer Success Manager for our K-12 team, as well as the TAFE area across Australia and New Zealand. So you may be familiar with one of my colleagues, Dr. Tim Kitchen, who has done quite a bit of work over in South Australia, as well as around the rest of Australia, in that K-12 space. So the Adobe Education team is a relatively newly formed team. There are 6 of us across all of Australia, which is a relatively large space for 6 people to be covering. And as I said, we cover K-12 all the way through to higher education. There are 2 of us dedicated to work in the K-12 space, and that is Dr. Tim and myself. And the remainder of the team work across that higher education space. So, look, I wanted to go in and have, as I said, a chat with you all about Adobe Express today. That is the tool that we are talking about. That is the tool that we're really excited to be supporting, particularly in a K-12 space, but really across all of education. To give you a bit of a background, Adobe Express is revolutionising how all students demonstrate digital fluency and communicate visually. My interest as an educator has always been in that idea of digital fluency. And when I talk about digital fluency, I'm not necessarily meaning digital literacy in the sense of people know how to go in and use digital tools. It's more about that idea of it's actually quite independent of the tool. What we're trying to do is build up that confidence in not just the students, but also in the educators to be able to go in and when they move into a higher education space or when they move out into an industry context, that they are not afraid of the tech that is in front of them, that they are able to go in and use that confidence that they've built up across their 13 years of K-12 education and then potentially their higher education space, to go in and be able to actively, authentically apply that knowledge that they've gained over that period, answer the problems that they're going to be facing when they're in that industry context. So that's the sort of aim. That's the thing that I'm really have been focusing on my entire education career. And it marries really nicely with what we're trying to do as part of the Adobe Education team. So what is Adobe Express? Adobe Express is essentially, I look at it sort of like a Swiss Army knife. So it is our all-in-one solution for digital storytelling. If you need to quickly create a poster, an infographic, edit or create a quick video, if you need to go in and put together a web page or a process journal or a reflection piece, having one single location that you can go to go in and create all of that content is absolutely critical. Because Adobe is such a big company, most people, when you say Adobe, there will be an automatic connection to generally it's going to be one of two things. One will be Acrobat and PDFs, and the other one would probably be Photoshop. But of course, we have a lot of industry standard software that as educators in South Australia DFE, you all have free access to. So please feel free to go in and use those tools. But the whole idea of Express is that it takes some of the best bits from a lot of those tools and puts it into an easy to use, accessible tool. What I will be doing, I'm not just going to be talking at you through a slideshow. Like I said, I do want you to jump into Express, and we'll have a poster that we can all go in and have a bit of a play with. And I will show you the interface. But essentially, the idea is that students of any skill level, and when I say students, I mean people new to this software. So I'm including educators, I'm including professional staff, I'm including senior leadership. My wife is a primary school principal down in Victoria. I won't reveal the school, but the surname would possibly be a giveaway. But I do a lot of work with her school around doing things like overall plans, like looking at school plans and curriculum plans and things like that, using tools like Adobe Express as a collaborative planning tool. It's a really fantastic way to go in and do it, because you don't need to download any software to be able to go in and use this. You can use it on your mobile phone. So long as you've got an internet connection, you can go in and create. And so for students who are potentially got remote access or don't necessarily have, $3,000 laptop set up at their school, so long as they've got an internet connection, they can go in and create. The idea is that you also have a bunch of individual features that came across from the other software, things like background removal, editing PDFs, and just really nice, simple things that if you need to quickly resize an image or you need to convert a video to a GIF, you can do that inside of this one app rather than having to go in and jump across multiple pieces of software and go through that learning curve to try and get your outcome. The idea of collaboration everywhere is a really key component. And I think particularly in the education context, the thing that we're finding is education is finding new and amazing ways to go in and use these tools in ways that enterprise never really does. Because enterprise, if you can imagine something like, say, an ANZ or a large corporate organization, they've got a very rigid structure where the marketing team will be focusing on the marketing content, and then the sales team will be focusing on the sales stuff. And so it's quite siloed. And I think the opportunity that you've got within a school system is to potentially look at how to break down some of those barriers using a tool like Adobe Express. It also has generative AI built into it. And we will talk in a little bit of detail, at least, about how our generative AI differs from the products that are out there and why it's a safe option for education. That's really, I think, the most important thing. When we take a look at all of these technologies coming through, Adobe has been very deliberate in the way that we have developed our generative AI tools. So rather than scraping all of the internet to go in and create imagery, we are only training it on content that we own and have free access to. So it's trained on our Adobe stock content and on Creative Commons licensed images. So what that means is, if you are trying to create an image of, for example, Donald Trump sitting on the beach drinking a can of Coke, you won't get in Adobe Firefly, our generative AI engine, you won't get a picture of Donald Trump drinking a can of Coke on a beach. If you know how to go in and create prompts, and I'm more than happy to go in and share our how-to prompt guide for Firefly, you may, if you're really good at prompting, get elderly gentleman sitting on a beach holding a red can, because Adobe doesn't own the rights to any images of Donald Trump, and they don't own the rights to any images of Coca-Cola. So it means that you're going to be safe. You're not going to be infringing on anybody's copyright. I know it's a very frustrating thing for my kids. My son, who's just turned 14 for the last few years, consistently tells me how disappointed he is that he can't make himself into an actual Marvel character going in and using this technology. But it does open up the discourse, which is, well, we don't own the rights to Marvel, therefore there are ways you can go in and create similar sorts of things, but you're not going to be ever stepping on somebody else's intellectual property toes. And again, from an education perspective, I think that's absolutely critical. When you've got students going in and using these tools, they need to know that the content that they're producing is their content. It's not content that is ripping off an artist or taking somebody else's design and stealing it. Everything that they will create is based on content that they have access to as part of their Adobe license. So hopefully that makes sense to people and people aren't going to have any concerns about that. So why Adobe Express? Obviously, the key thing there is that interoperability with the Adobe Creative Cloud. So the fact that we have these amazingly powerful industry standard tools like Photoshop, like Illustrator, like InDesign, like Premiere Pro, that are being used widely across the education space in amazing ways. There are natural interoperability plugins within those bits of software, and that is what's really being focused on in 2025. So we're looking a lot more at how we can go both ways with a bit of software. So, for example, at the moment, you can go in and you can start a design in InDesign, for example, doing the layouts, and you can bring that across into Adobe Express if you want to then go in and add in some animation or look at publishing it online. So there's a lot of cross-functionality that is coming, and more is coming every day. What it essentially means is that there isn't a creative ceiling for the student or teacher. So you'll find when you're using Adobe Express, it's a streamlined tool. It's what we call a low-lift, high-impact tool. Not super difficult to go in and learn. By the end of today's session, you will all be absolute masters of Adobe Express, which will be wonderful. And you can then go in and start to see how you could potentially use it in a classroom context or even in a professional context, within your team. If you're doing planning, if you're going in and you're creating newsletters, etc., if you're creating marketing materials that you need to be going in and sending out. As we said, safe generative AI capability, so it's trained on Adobe stock images and openly licensed content. So we know that that content is safe and appropriate for classroom use. There is also human oversight in that loop. We've always got a human in the loop for our process, which means that we're constantly going in and checking. And if people do identify things that are straddling the line of being plagiarism or culturally inappropriate or whatever it might be, we act on that immediately. Part of the Adobe Creative Campus Network, so we now have 13, I think I need to update this slide because it's now 14 Australian universities and over 100 globally are part of our Adobe Creative Campus Network. And as part of that, every single student at those universities has full and free access to Adobe Express across their student journey. And so one of the things that we're really looking to do is, if we know that those students are going to be going in and using those tools when they hit higher education, taking advantage of the fact that they've got access to those tools when they're in that K-12 space is a really great way to go in and keep that consistent learning journey all the way along. So having that familiarity with tools. And even though we talk about digital fluency as being that ability to go in and look at using a digital tool and not really having to have significant experience of it to be confident enough to have a play with it, having that consistency of a tool across the learning journey makes it a really powerful tool for all students. Firefly is the generative AI engine that is built into all Adobe tools. It used to be called Adobe Sensei, and it had its start back in 2003. So we've been in the AI game for 22 years now. That was originally, and you would know this if you've ever opened Acrobat and you've opened up a PDF that has sign fields and you hit the tab key and it goes to the next field that you need to go in and fill in. That was our very first move into the AI space, and that was going in and automatically recognizing text fields in a PDF. It's now called Firefly, and it works across all of our space. Again, responsible training. So we train our Firefly generative AI models on licensed and public domain content. We have diverse representation in our images that we go in and create. So if you go in and create, or you type in a prompt for a doctor, you're not just going to get a bunch of white middle-aged men as doctors. You're going to get a broad representation across the community. And this is designed very specifically to avoid harmful bias across gender, age, and skin tone. We've got a transparency component built into it, and this is, again, a really key component and something I will share details with Chelsea. We have content credentials, which are essentially like a digital food label that goes along with the content that you're producing. It's like it's a digital fingerprint, essentially, going in and saying, yep, this tool was, or this image was created using Photoshop. There were some layer adjustments. There were a couple of blending modes. There were a few elements added in there. And if it uses generative AI, it tells you how and where generative AI was used. And that's part of that digital provenance, so that you're not sitting there and having to wonder, is this real? Is it fake? Is it all just an illusion? Is it made by a bot? This allows you to go in and actually see how an image was created. And I think when you think about it from an education context, it's sort of the modern equivalent going in and referencing when you're going in and writing an essay, rather than going in and having your bibliography at the end of it with all of the books or sources that you've referenced. This is going in and saying, this is what we've done in a digital context. Again, from a safety, security, and privacy perspective, we won't train our foundational Firefly generative AI models on your content. So what that means is, if you are going in and you are uploading photos from your school, you will not see images of your school suddenly appearing at large in Firefly and in other people's content. So the content that you're using will stay your content. It doesn't get fed into the matrix. It stays absolutely your property, your intellectual property, and it doesn't feed into our models at all. As I said, we've got an AI impact assessment and AI ethics boards that constantly and continually do ongoing reviews and refinement of our data. So, as I said, we are working really closely, particularly in the K-12 space, to go in and make sure that everything that we can go do to safeguard our content is safeguarded. We've got Safe Technology for Schools badging. We're the only generative AI engine that currently has that. So you know that you can do that sort of safely. And again, as that element where people talk about, well, what's the sustainability of generative AI? We've very much prioritized energy efficiency and emissions. So our energy runs pretty lean when you compare it to some of the other models out there, because we've got a concentrated set of stock that we're going in and training from. We're not having to go in and branch that out. So it's not going in and using masses and masses of processing power just to come up with an idea. We are also a founding member of the Content Authenticity Initiative. And again, this is something that I'll share with you when I share this slide deck. You'll see this actually is a live link out to the Content Authenticity Initiative. And that's an industry-wide initiative, which again is focused on that idea of content credentials, where you go in and you have that digital fingerprint across image creation. We've been working with people like Reuters, BBC News, and a couple of large camera manufacturers, including Canon and Leica, to go in and have this stuff embedded into the content. And essentially, for the tech heads in the room, it's adding metadata to your design files and your images, and it's a searchable content. So you can actually drag it through the Content Authenticity Initiative website, and it'll go in and give you that digital provenance. Again, safe for education, only licensed, transparent. Please, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, or you want additional information, reach out to me and ask. I think the other thing, probably just before we jump into the tool itself and start to have a play, is that it won't allow you to go in and generate in another artist's style. And I think that's a really key component, because when students are going in and doing research projects and they've got to think about what is it that makes a designer's style, there are a lot of generative AI engines out there that will literally go in and duplicate that existing work. And there are workarounds to go in and do that if there are theoretically barriers. Kids are always going to be the first ones to go in and find a workaround. We don't have that workaround. Anthony said, you might be covering this later, but how do you get the AI to simply modify the save image rather than start all over again? It's so frustrating when a generated image is 75% there. You ask for one modification, then lose some good elements from the previous image. It's frustrating. I couldn't agree with you more, Anthony. There are a couple of things you can do there. And again, rather than going into huge details with that, what I will do is I'll put a pack together for Chelsea. You can either use the Firefly tool itself through firefly.adobe.com, or when you're going in, you're generating your image, you can just go in and add elements to an image. So if you know that you've got essentially the right image and you just want to add an element in, you can go in and do that. Within Firefly, you'll always get 4 options. If you're using Firefly through Photoshop, it always will do it in a non-destructive edit. So what we mean by non-destructive editing is it's not deleting any of the original or overriding any of the original information, it's putting it on its own separate layer. So you've got that full creative control over it. So yeah, there are some ways that we can go in and do that. I think what you're going to find is that we've just released, as in less than a month ago, Adobe Firefly Image Engine 4. The quality of images is getting much more photorealistic. And that's just something that takes time to go in and develop that overall model. So we're getting better and better. But again, this is where we're really wanting to partner with institutions to make sure that what we're developing and delivering is what you guys need. Because we have an idea that education has needs, but we know how different education needs are, not just across, K-12 versus higher education, but even within the K-12 section, within subjects, within subject areas, within year levels. What kids need at a foundation level is not what they need when they're going in and preparing for their exams in year 11 or 12. So we are, as much as we possibly can, trying to go in and focus on supporting you by giving you a tool that does everything that you need it to do as you need it to do. I've got a couple of examples here. I won't play them just because I know the session's being recorded and I don't have the permissions from them to go in and actually play that. But just wanted to talk briefly to, we had a couple of Adobe days, and these are days, and again, I'll talk to these in a second, at Box Hill High School, where we had students from their Year 9 cohort going in and creating short videos. So I was there in March. There were 90 Year 9s in the room. I'm not asking for sympathy. It was an amazing experience. It was an exhausting experience. 90 kids in one room. It's a big. They've got a big library. They've got a very big library, but what I was amazed by was the fact that I got in there at 8:30 and I left there at 2:45. And at the end of that time, each of those kids had gone in and collaboratively worked in groups of 2 or 3, collaboratively produced a video that they were really proud of, that tied into their schoolwork. And it was a fantastic day because kids have that built-in resilience and that built-in I think investigative nature where they want to see what happens when you press this button. What happens when I go in and do this? What is the limit? How can I break this is the way that I tend to sort of frame it. And I think that how can I break this mentality is actually really useful when it comes to not just creative thinking, but using software. Because it goes in and shows you what your limits are. And then you need to think about, well, what do I need to do to get around that? Do I need to go in and have a more powerful piece of software like a Premiere Pro, like a Photoshop, like an Illustrator? Or is there a way I can sort of game the system and tweak it? And I'm constantly fascinated by the way that kids across that K-12 space are so confident to just go in and troubleshoot and not worry about it being wrong. Coming from a higher education background where students are really quite risk averse. They do not, as a general rule, like to go in and just see what happens. They like to have a structure, they like to have a plan, and they like to be able to go through that. They have this idea that creative process is linear. And, you start, you go, and you approach, and you do a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. Whereas we know in reality, it's all over the place. Everybody's bouncing all over the place, and you will refresh ideas, and you will go back in and out of an idea and a concept along the way. So I find it really, really refreshing every time I have the chance to go in and speak to kids and work with kids. So that's stuff that we can go in and offer. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to jump into Adobe Express. What you'll see in Adobe Express for Education is that you've got 4 nice, quick, simple prompts for the major activities like making a video, creating a graphic, building a web page, animating your voice. There are suggested options sitting there. Over on the left, you've got your navigation menu, and you'll see there's some really cool stuff in there. One we won't be talking about, but we will be talking about next time I come back and chat with you guys, because it's about to be launched in Australia, which is Classrooms. And Classrooms just makes it a lot easier to go in and create bulk assignments and assign them out to students. It plays nicely with your learning management system. It plays nicely with all those other bits and pieces. So in terms of the workload to go in and get this stuff out in the hands of students, just a lot more straightforward process. What you'll see is that there's a circle with a plus at the top. When you click on that, you've got options to go in and create. Similar as you've got here with things like make a video, create a graphic. There's some social media components. It's essentially the same tool as you've got for industry, which is the enterprise version, just with a couple of guardrails in place. So it doesn't have scheduling of social media. It doesn't have some of the additional templates and stock options that you would have across an enterprise license. And you can go in and you can create from a whole bunch of different templates. And when you click on here and go to document, for example, if I went to gift certificate, I can click on browse templates, and I'll get literally tens of thousands of templates that I can go through. When I'm back on here in that little circle with the plus, you'll see I've also got all of those quick actions, and that's what I was talking about before, the bits that come from the other Adobe tools. So things like remove background. And again, as a former graphic designer, I used to teach a class about 10 years ago or so in Photoshop, going in and doing complex selections. So going in and selecting complex people with hair, essentially, is what we would call a complex selection, and removing the background. That was a 3-hour class. I'll be honest, it was a very good class. Students learn a heck of a lot at the end of it, but it's completely unnecessary now because you can literally do it at the click of a button. And that's a good thing, because if you can do it at the click of a button, it saves you 3 hours in your timeline, and it means you can do all of those other things. You can push that creative idea more. You can go in and explore a few other options. You can go in and really progress your concepts much more than you were when you were being restrained by time just to go in and do those technical bits and pieces. But you'll see in there too, you've got things like converting PDFs, editing PDFs, making logos, resizing and trimming videos, converting files, combining files, and then you've got all of your generative AI content there. And that's sort of, Anthony, where I was talking before about the inserting objects into an image. That's where you can go in and you can add those specific elements just by going in and painting in the area that you want the element added to, and it'll go in and adjust it that way. What I will go in and do now is sort of show you how this works, how you would potentially use it in a classroom context, and use this as a way of just getting you to have a little bit of a play inside of Adobe Express. So when I click on Remix, what it's actually going to go in and do is it's going to open up Adobe Express. If you haven't logged in, it'll ask you to go in and log in, and that's where you just go in and use your education login. I click on Remix, it's going to open up Adobe Express, and it's duplicating the file. So it's going in and making a copy inside of my own document. Creativity for All in my classroom. And what you'll see here, inside of this poster, I've got my workspace. It's just here. In terms of navigation, it's a lot more streamlined and straightforward than other Adobe tools. So if you think about Photoshop, where you've got your toolbar that sits over on the left, and then you've got all of your windows sitting over on the right, you've got all of that navigation content. This just makes things a lot more simple. So over on the left, you've got access to your stuff, which is just a folder of all of your assets. You've got access to brands. So, and this is again from an education context. If you're looking at putting content together for your school, you want to go in and have a brand. You've got, your logo, or if it's a government, Department for Education type release, you can go in and really easily create reusable templates to go in and have a sort of a structural similarity. And again, as I said before, the work that I've done with my wife's school is going in and creating a brand for the school. So when they're going in and putting posters and things up around the classroom, it's got the logo, it's got the colours, it's using the right typefaces without people always having to be going in and searching and starting from scratch. You see there, we've also got options there for media tabs, for text. We can bring in design elements. We can create charts and grids. We've got access to our generative AI. And if I click on an image here, for example, you'll notice that my edit window pops up on the left, and it's contextual depending on what I've got selected. So if I've got an image selected, you'll see it's giving me my image options. If I select a bit of type, coming in and showing me all of the options I've got for type. So for type, I can go in and change my typeface. I can go in and change the color. I can change the layout of the type, the position, the opacity. I can add effects to the type. Text effects, I can go in and make it look like it's all silver balloons or popcorn or whatever I want, going in and using generative AI. But I can also go in and do things like drop shadows or add shapes behind it. I can animate the text, bring it in, pick it out, have it fade in, bounce, do all sorts of bits and pieces there. If you have particular typefaces that you want to go in and use, you can go in and use them, because Adobe, as part of your license, you'll also have access to Adobe fonts, which is over 50,000 typefaces. When you're going in and you're looking for the type, you can go through your little navigation option here. You can see all of the fonts that you have. You can upload your own. You can go to more fonts, and if you go to more fonts, you'll see you can look at it through languages. You've got a whole bunch of different languages there. You can go in and you'll see a preview of what those different ones look like. For something like these images where we've got those butterflies in the background, that's where we use the remove background effect. And I can tell that I've used the remove background effect, not just because I can see the background has been removed, but when I click on that object, when I click on any of those butterflies, and you see up here in my image window, and I've got the remove background is highlighted, and it's got a little icon with a straight line and a reverse arrow. That's letting me know that I can go in there and take it back. So it's what we call a non-destructive edit. So that remove background is just an edit that's been made to that image. It is non-destructive. I can always at any stage go back in and re-add that in. So any of our little adjustments that we've got, if we're going in and doing anything to an image, if I go in and, for example, removed an object from it, and that's where, if you're going in and starting to do your editing, it will go in and come up with that little circle with the line and the backward facing arrow that lets you know that you can go in and edit that. What I would like you to do, if you are feeling brave, is go in and tell me what you do in your classroom or in your school or in your department or in your area. What do you do to go in and promote the idea of creativity for all? So I've given 3 prompts there. I've said teach critical thinking, encourage my students to collaborate, and create cultural and social understanding. I'd like you to go in and have a bit of a play with it. You can go in and change any of the elements you want. If you wanted to go in and change it from in my classroom to in my school, you literally click on the element, double click in it to go in and get into an active text field. You can go in and you can, as I said, change the typeface. You can move these elements around. I've said ABC. You might want to go in and make it 1, 2, 3. You might not like butterflies. You might want to go in and put in some graphic elements. So if I went to say elements over here, I could go to shapes. And that's where I could maybe go in and say, all right, well, I like vector stuff, so I'm going to go with something that's a little bit cleaner. I'm going to go with a nice straightforward shape there. You can see I can go in and change the color. It gives me themes. It gives me additional colors. I can go in and custom color. I've got an eyedropper tool there inside of the fill option. And when I click on that, it'll give me a pixel specific. I can go in and isolate to a single pixel within an image and pull the color out. So if I want to go in and get a harmonious color set across from a single image, I can go in and do that. So let's pull one of those sort of iridescent blues from the wing of the butterfly. Beautiful. Maybe I want to go in and do it a little bit darker. Just click on the eyedropper again. Like one of these darker ones. Yeah, nice. And so really easily you can go in and build up that design. What you'll notice too is that you've got options up here that will generalize across your entire design there. So things like dynamically resizing. So if you know, and again, this is probably more for higher K-12. So if you've got people doing the sort of visual communication sort of ideas where they're going in and looking at creating multiple designs for multiple outcomes, or if you're going in and you're creating stuff for an upcoming fete or an upcoming event and you want to go in and have a banner ad and you want to go in and have an A4 poster and you've got a real estate agent billboard that's going out the front, you want to have the same information, you can really easily go in and create that. So if I click on here, you'll see I've got all of my sizes. So if I went to say document, you can go in and type in a presentation layout. I've got the ability to go in and duplicate and resize when I do select any of them. So what you'll see is that will go in and duplicate my existing design. I'll try and take some of the layout elements into account. And you can see there, it's not done a brilliant job because it's gone in and it hasn't cropped off any of those elements. If you are going to be going in and doing that, if you're going to be going in and creating multiple iterations from a design, my best recommendation to give you would be to start with a square design, because the square design is probably something that you'd be advertising through a social media. If you've got a school Instagram account or something like that, square is good because square will scale up nicely to a portrait, which is that taller than it is wide, or landscape, which is wider than it is tall. So just a little designer tip in there. Make it square to start with, and it makes it a lot easier. But what you'll notice when you do go in and create that is all of that content comes across. It duplicates it onto a new page. You can add new pages at any stage. Bandwidth is really struggling a little bit, and so I do apologize for that. When I click on add page, you can go in and add ones of the same size or custom. So up here, we've got the resize, we've got themes. We can change our background color. We can increase and introduce margins. You're probably not going to spend a lot of time going in and doing bulk create, but there are features to go in and do that. If you have iterative processes that you need to go through, you can go in and quickly replace content, and you can go in and do translations. So there is the ability there to go in and translate into a number of different languages. So when I click on translate, you'll see it says there, translate all pages, because I've only got one page. If I had multiple pages, I could select which pages I want to go in and translate. And I can go in and choose from a list of over 50 languages. There are more and more being added every day. So if I went in and say, if you're doing this as a welcome, or if you're doing it as a cultural day at school, my wife's school, for example, is a Italian bilingual school. And so when they go in and they create content for any of their fetes, any of their school days, concerts, all those sorts of things, they do everything in the two languages. So they do everything in English and they do everything in Italian. And this is just a really nice, easy way to go in and do it. Is it fail-safe? Is it error-proof? Always go in and check, because it's using the Google Translate engine, which does a really good job now at going in and doing actual conversational translation. You still want to go in and check, particularly when it's things like acronyms that aren't necessarily going to be read particularly well. Do go in and check that. But as a starting point, it's a really nice, easy way to go in and design. Up in the top right, you'll see you've got your navigation features. You can go in and invite other people to it. You've got a little light bulb icon, which is your learn feature. And through that, you can go in and see very, very quickly how to go in and do various bits and pieces. There are things like guided activities. So if I click on one of them, it will actually pop up with a little prompt and a little guide sitting on the side of the screen that will step me step by step through an idea. And that can be really useful for students, particularly at that sort of K6 level rather than the 712, where you want to have that more direct, explicit instruction. Go in and download it. You can download it by clicking on that little U with the downward facing arrow. You'll notice there that you can download a poster or your static content in 4 different ways: as a PNG, as a JPEG, as a standard PDF, or as a PDF for printing. And what you'll see there too is that when you go in and do that, is it's automatically going to be going in and adding in accessibility tags. So if you have students who need to use a screen reader to be able to go in and read content, or if you're sharing content out to parents and you know that they need a screen reader to be able to go in and access it, we do have that accessibility built in when you go in and save it out as a PDF. You can also go in and share that product with other people. And this is where, if you're going in and getting students working in a group context, so they're going in and doing, sort of group work, putting a presentation together, doing some ideation, doing some research, going in and sharing it very easily. You can go in and assign it to various people. And you've also got the ability there, and this is what I did when I went in and shared this with you in the first place, is you can create a view-only link. So when you click on a view-only link, and you click on this little button there that says allow others to remix, what you will get is you will get that link that you saw before, where you had the image popping up with a little blue button that says remix this. And that is something that you can go in and you can control. You can go and control who has access to that. So you can then go in and turn that off. You can unpublish the link, delete the link at any stage. So it just makes it a little bit easier for you to go in and share content with the people that you need to. You don't need to go in and have a copy of it saved in a file and they then need to go in and download that. And this is just a simple click. They will literally click on remix this. It will open up with their own version inside of their own folder and they're good to go. Download this as a JPEG or as a PNG. I don't know if anyone knows the difference between JPEG and PNG. It says here PNG is best for images and JPEG is best for small file sizes. It's not quite accurate. The difference between a PNG, which is a portable network graphic file, and a JPEG, which is a joint photographers group file, is that the PNG will be a slightly larger file because it maintains edge clarity a lot better than JPEG. So JPEG will go in and try and it'll look at this image, for example, and say, well, there's a whole bunch of yellow there. So rather than going in and remembering the yellow value at every single pixel location, it'll go in and say this whole area is yellow. And so what you'll find is when you jump into the file in Photoshop or in a photo editor, you get a little bit of blurring on those edges. In a PNG, you will have crisper outcomes. So if you've got any text content at all in there that you want to remain legible, I would always suggest that you go in and save it as a PNG. It's just my tip. So yeah, look, in terms of support for staff, the 2 main ones that we offer and the ones that I think will really get you thinking more about how to go in and use it in that educational context is the Adobe Creative Educator Level 1 and the Adobe Creative Educator Level 2. The Level 1 goes for about 60 minutes. So same as this, essentially what we would be doing, instead of me just going in and talking through the whys, we would be focusing on the hows. So you would be creating a remix of a poster and you'd also be creating a reflective journal as a web page. And that's a really great way of going and collating your resources and content. That's Adobe Creative Educator Level 1. Creative Educator Level 2 takes a little bit longer. We focus on a couple more advanced concepts in there, including animated characters, so creating voiceovers for animated characters inside of an Express video, and actually going in and editing and creating video content inside of Express. At the end of that, you are eligible to join the Adobe Creative Educator Leaders Program. And the Adobe Creative Educator Leaders Program is one where we're trying to build up a community of practice Australia-wide that can then go in and connect with the Adobe Creative Educator leaders from across the world. And so this idea of a global community of practice is something we're really passionate about, because educators, like we said, you guys are on the front line. You are the ones who are having to adapt and adjust for incredibly high student needs and government requirements and all sorts of things. And so if there are tools that you guys can go in and use that will help you in that process in any way, we are here to go in and support you with that. The key learning outcomes that you'll get, not just for yourselves, but that you can also then go in and apply for your students, is fostering that creative learning process and outcomes, scaffolding and sequencing creativity so that it's not just a case of here's a blank screen, go in and fill it with amazing. Encouraging the idea of sharing and communication through the creative learning process and choosing the right tools to help those students express their creativity. We run workshops most Tuesdays and Thursdays throughout the year. Again, if you're interested in us either coming out to your schools or coming back in this sort of a forum to do it online, reach out to Chelsea, reach out to me, let us know if you're interested in that. We are more than happy. Adelaide's a very short visit from Melbourne. I'm happy to come over at any stage to go in and run stuff with you. We can also, as I said, obviously run face-to-face workshops on request. In terms of additional support, we've also got our Wednesday webinar, which is just about to be renamed a weekly webinar, because if it's a Wednesday webinar, it really does lock us into delivering it on one particular day. But what we generally do is run 5 or 6 webinars each semester. All of the sessions are recorded, so you can go in and check back in on previous sessions. At the moment, the majority are focused on K-12, but we are looking to go in and quite intentionally label whether a resource is K-12 focused or whether it is higher education focused. We also, as I said, run Adobe Days. You can come out to a school for a full day or part day, and that's where we were looking at the Box Hill High School as an example before. I ran a session at another high school in Melbourne, out in Craigieburn last week. That was just for staff, and so we spoke with all of their STEM staff, going in and essentially running the ACE qualification out there. At the Adobe Days, we can come out and we can integrate into your curriculum. So rather than it being a standalone, here's a tool, let's go in and do a fun thing with it and then leave it alone, building it into the work that the students are already doing is wonderful. So for the Box Hill students, for example, that was part of they had a city school unit, which was for their geography class, where they had to go in and create a short reflective video, how they saw Melbourne through a particular lens. So it might be through the lens of sport, or it might be through fashion, or it might be through food. And so what we did was go in and give them that introduction process of creating a video so that they got familiar and comfortable with the tool, so that when they went out and actually shot that footage, they would be able to then go in and continue that edit process. We've also got an education website where we can go in and share all of the latest on emerging skills and job reports, support students and staff. And we also have a monthly newsletter that includes things like education events, product updates, and templates and links to resources. Just before I finish up, I'm going to go in and show you your new best friend for learning all things Adobe. If you go into the Adobe Express homepage, you will see there are 2 little links over there on the left-hand side. One is your Learn option, and that's where you can go in and find literally thousands of videos that go all the way from about 30 seconds up to about 20 minutes. There are prompts, there are all sorts of bits and pieces in there. I've also gone in and we'll share with Chelsea the Adobe Education Exchange, which is an online resource, again, primarily K-12 focused, although a lot of the content has been produced in America, so there will be curriculum differences. But that content includes lesson plans, templates, step-by-step resources, everything you possibly need, assessment rubrics to go in and create that content without having to sort of start from scratch. And the other thing inside of Adobe Express window, mindful of the time, is we have educator resources, which again give you a lot of just really simple step-by-step guides that you can then go in and adjust, create your own templates, and accommodate anything that you want. And that, my wonderful South Australian friends, is me done at time.